What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So 20 years it had been since the UFC went to Miami, and boy, did this card deliver. The whole week was fun. The build-up was awesome. We saw the retirement of Jorge Masvidal essentially in his backyard. We saw Rob Font get an incredible KO victory. He's right back in the swing of things at bantamweight. But I want to start with the most important, biggest news of the night, which is that incredible KO victory by Israel Adesanya. I mean, talk about having your back against the wall. Quite literally, he had his back against the wall figuratively in the fact that he's lost 3 fights in a row to this guy, 2 kickboxing and 1 MMA. But also literally, he was hurt in that fight, back against the cage. He said the leg kicks were really starting to deaden his legs. He shelled up while Pereira threw a mean combination and then just hit the most beautiful overhand, almost a walk-off KO, but he finished it with a couple of shots on the ground. What do you make of Adesanya's performance? And now he is the champ again.
I love it. And, UFC 287 really was an impressive card. But for Izzy to just stand out above all the other performances that we saw take place that night of fights was super spectacular. And it's just like Izzy to do that. Come out there and burn the house down right there at the pinnacle of his career, the biggest moment he could possibly have. And it's so strange to see that after somebody's been the champion for so long, to see them reach new heights. It's almost like once you reach the top of the mountain, you're now the champion. It sort of just goes back downhill from there. But he had this crazy guy come out of nowhere that was from his past and move into his sport now, which sort of got everybody excited to see what Izzy's going to do about this guy, this number one villain for him. And I really did like that he came in. He wasn't the talker. He wasn't the really loud, vibrant guy on social media leading up to this fight. He was kind of quiet, and he was going with that, silent assassin sort of vibe. And he was like, look, this guy has hunted me for years, and now I'm about to hunt him. And everything Izzy does is so calculated, but nothing is more calculated than his striking and his performances inside the octagon. It's really hard to find somebody that checks all the boxes in the sport of MMA. Izzy does them all so well, but the one thing that he does that's most impressive is his fighting performances.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And this fight was so important for his legacy because Israel he is a great champion, and he was for a very long time before he lost to Alex the first time in MMA. And that kind of tarnished him a little bit because it's like, well, this is a guy that beat him twice in kickboxing, and now he's come over to MMA. He's very new and very green as far as MMA goes. He's having his 7th fight for a title, and then he ends up beating Izzy and winning that fight. If Izzy were to come back in this rematch and lose again, even worse, get finished again, it definitely would have been a dark cloud hanging over what is otherwise an incredible career. So to beat Alex and not only close the chapter with a win, but to close the chapter with a clean, out cold knockout the way he did is so important for his legacy, and you could just taste it. He wanted that so badly, and he knew what he had to do to get it. And as you said, he was very quiet on social media leading up to this. All he said was, look, I was the hunted, and now I'm the hunter. You guys show up, I'm going to be in a different pair of shorts. I got the blue shorts to match the blue wrapped gloves this time, coming out of the blue corner, and you're going to see what I can do when the dog is backed up against the wall. And that's exactly what happened. He is a showman. He is a technician. He's everything, as you said, checks all the boxes as far as being a superstar in the sport. And he showed us just why he is one of the most watched fighters, one of the most watched champions in the UFC. It was, I think, the 6th largest gate in UFC history, $11.9 million, Dana White said. And so Israel draws his crowd, and I think the UFC will definitely be coming to Miami more and more now, and I think they'll be looking to put Adesanya on some of those future cards.
Yeah, Izzy's a superstar, and everybody loves to watch him, and they tune in when he's about to fight. But the one thing with losing to Alex Pereira was sort of tarnishing was his greatest of all time status. And I know that there's really no way we're ever going to settle in on who's the greatest of all time. But if he wouldn't have gotten that win over him, a lot of people would have dismissed him from the ranks of the greatest of all time forever, because he can't beat a guy who's, only had 7 or 8 fights in MMA. And people kind of would have just pushed his whole career aside and gone with like, okay, he was good, but he wasn't that good, which is not the case. Izzy is absolutely one of the best fighters the UFC's ever had. He's probably the best striker that the UFC's ever had, and for that matter, that MMA has ever seen. And I'm so glad after everything Izzy's done for the sport of MMA, to see him get that win. I mean, like he said, winning the first belt was sweet, but nothing was as sweet as the second one. The second belt, to earn that the way he earned it, is like we said it in the pre-fight build-up. Hollywood couldn't write this story. Nobody could come up with this. The WWE couldn't have scripted this out, and years and years and years of development could not have come up with a story as good as this one. You know, it takes two to tango. Izzy was the antagonist in Pereira's career and his story, and the same thing can be said for Pereira and Izzy's story. And just to see, you know, the morphing of good guy to bad guy, and you kind of got to see this war between two people that come from totally different parts of the world. They come from totally different, you know, upbringings, and they literally had a path that crossed at one point, and then it seemed like it was a million miles away just a few short years later, all to get brought right back to each other years down the road for the biggest belt, for the biggest organization in front of the most people possible. I feel like it did not only Alex Pereira justice, but it did Izzy a lot of justice. Those are two of the best strikers the world has ever seen, and not that many people saw them when they were having those wars in kickboxing, but everybody saw them fight for the UFC's belt.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it was such poetry in motion to see how he got that victory and then did the bow and arrow. And I think there was a specific reason why he did 3, because he lost 3 times, but he put the final dagger into Poatan. Now, I'm not a big fan of like roping people's kids into the equation, but Alex's son did make fun of Izzy when he got starched in Brazil in that fight where he had to have the oxygen mask on and everything. And I can't remember exactly what he did to taunt him, but Izzy did get his revenge on young Poatan. He looked into the crowd and found him and then did what he did to him, I believe.
I'll educate you. It's called the dead fish. It's a popular soccer, I guess, celebration. After somebody scores, they'll run and then they'll jump and act like they're a dead fish and fall on the floor. And that's exactly what Poatan's son did to him. Now, Poatan's son was probably 5, 6, maybe 8 years old at that time, but that stuck out in Izzy's mind. And it is kind of harsh to have somebody do that to you as you're knocked out on the canvas and everybody's, you know, kind of watching you and a lot of people are laughing at you. And I know that Izzy's a grown man, but at the heart of it, at the root of everything, he is a competitor. He's fierce. And to be in a profession like mixed martial arts, you do have to remain young at heart for as long as you can. So I know he's in his 30s, but I know he wasn't able to just, you know, push that aside. He did have to do it. And I think it's more or less the showman coming out of him. It's not really like, oh, I have this beef with some 15-year-old kid.
Right.
He's just a showman. He's going to do everything that he can. And literally every single bullet point as far as entertainment goes, Izzy hits. You know, the ultimate showman in our sport was Conor McGregor, but I almost feel like Izzy is a more refined, more polished version of an entertainer of Conor McGregor. You know, Conor does a lot of things great. He's got the accent working for him. He does all of the great trash talking, and he was able to back it up for many, many years going towards the belt. And then he was able to keep himself real relevant doing whatever it was he was doing inside and outside of the octagon. But when it comes to when the lights turn off and the music turns on, all the way down to Trapped, playing a song that probably that came out 20 years ago, Headstrong by Trapped, and he said he only heard it literally on the way out to Miami, and he just heard it in the car, and he was like, that's the song. And he went with it right there. Everything from that to walking out to having the dog collar on and all of the little things that he does that a lot of people simply don't notice, or it just breezes right over their head. If you go back and look at it, it is some of the most creative and impressive stuff, not only that we've ever seen in mixed martial arts, but in entertainment in general.
Yeah, it's very Muhammad Ali-like, and that's where I think he kind of differs from Conor McGregor in a way. Him and Conor are both great showmen, both for different reasons, but Izzy is a showman who actually has proven he's able to back it up over the years. Conor had this amazing meteoric run, but he never really defended a belt. He never had his back against the wall. He never got in there as a challenger against somebody like a Khabib that already beat him and then knocked him out. You know what I mean? And I think that's why that moment of knocking Alex out was so giant for Izzy. But you're right. I mean, he's one of the best. He's the benchmark of what the sport has as far as entertaining fighter who's also a champion, has all the skills necessary, and can be a superstar. And all of the little subtleties make up for that. And quite frankly, I think shifting gears now to Alex Pereira, he's a big star as well, and for a different reason. He's this big, stoic, scary looking guy that knocks people out cold. He's got stones tattooed on his left hand as if to insinuate that his hands are made out of pure stone, and it certainly looks like it at certain times. And I even saw something on Instagram prior to the fight that said they need to ban Alex Pereira's left hook immediately. And it was like a compilation of like all these left hook knockouts that Alex landed on people. And it literally seems like he touches them with his fist and they just drop. And it's pretty incredible. It's pretty amazing stuff. So where do you see Alex going from here? I have my thoughts, and my thoughts are that he should probably move to 205. He is a gigantic human being. He cuts a tremendous amount of weight to make 185. And I think we saw last Saturday at UFC 287 that his chin is starting to pay the price a little bit for, not to take anything away from that great shot that Izzy landed, but I think Alex would be a little bit more durable at 205 than he is at 185. And on top of that, I don't think it's really enticing to do another match again for the belt at 185. This is the 5th time these guys fought now. The division does kind of need to move on. Izzy should probably defend against somebody at 85 next who's a fresh face, and Alex can maybe go up and work his way. He's probably only one fight away from the title at 205. How big would their third and final trilogy MMA match, 5th fight in total, be if it were to take place at 205 and it was for both belts? We saw Izzy go up and try to get that 205 belt against Jan Blachowicz and was unsuccessful. Boy, wouldn't he love to become champ and get that belt off of Pereira if that could happen.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that's the only way we would see the trilogy happen. You know, I was sort of the mindset that a lot of people are of like, okay, well, Alex Pereira gave him his shot, and now he needs to return the favor again. And then Izzy reminded us in the post-fight press conference, he was like, no, I gave him the original shot. He had only beaten Sean Strickland, essentially,
right,
out of everybody at the 185. The only big name he beat was Sean Strickland, and I decided to let him get fast-tracked all the way to me because I wanted to give the fans and the sport and my legacy something really impressive to enjoy. And I personally think that if Izzy Adesanya would have halted him, he would have had to do a little bit more heavy lifting, and who knows if we ever would have had this storyline make it to fruition and actually exist for our entertainment purposes.
Right.
But I think that Izzy's chapter with Alex Pereira is closed for now, and if the only way it would open back up is like you're saying, if Alex goes and gets the 205 belt, and they drum up a little more drama, and Izzy goes for the champ status. But I think both of these guys can steer clear of each other now. There's been a lot of conflict and conflict resolution. Now Izzy can go deal with 185. There seems to be a lot of new faces down there. You've got your Khamzat Chimaevs. Shavkat Rakhmonov is only a small move away. You got Bo Nickel, who seems to be on another fast track, so he might get to deal with a second fast track fighter. And then Alex Pereira is sizably bigger than Glover Teixeira, who was just the 205 champion not that long ago. So I think there's a lot of fun fights for Alex Pereira to have at 205, and I don't know if it's even healthy or safe for Pereira to get down to 185 that many more times in his life. You know, after this last Saturday, I don't see him ever weighing 185 again, and I think that's for the best. I think that the UFC has a star on their hands in Alex Pereira. And both of these guys inside the octagon have a lot more fun fights left. And I know Izzy said he doesn't have that many left, but I see Izzy fighting at least 5 more times. And I think Alex Pereira will be around for quite some time. I think he's already got the belt once. He'd love to go to 205 and get it. And then once they're both done fighting and once they're both done being the UFC characters and champions that they are, I would love to see both of them move over to Hollywood, move over into acting, because Izzy's got everything it takes. He could act and probably outact a lot of the famous actors that we know that are out there in the world right now. And with the discipline and work ethic that he's brought throughout his entire career in MMA, he would probably excel pretty quickly in that. And I don't know if Alex Pereira would be the skilled actor and the thespian that Izzy could be.
He's the bad guy. He's the bad guy in every James Bond movie.
100%. If you told me that Alex Pereira just got a deal to do the next James Bond villain movie, sign me up. I'm going to see it. And he doesn't even just need to say one word. Just come in there looking as scary as you do.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's definitely a Hollywood future for both of these guys. Maybe they could even have a 6th installment where they act together and they have a choreographed fight in a movie or something like that.
Right. Our youngest brother said that they should probably both get roles as like Mortal Kombat fighters and maybe be, cemented into the game as like new characters that Mortal Kombat has created. So
I could see that. We could add another set of arms on Poatan. He could be the new age Gordo.
Exactly. That would be crazy.
But yeah, I mean, I tell you, this is Alex Pereira truly needs to make a run now at 205. He has nothing left at 185. There's some really good grapplers on the way up. Thank God for him. He avoided the people like the Robert Whitakers, the Hamzat Chimaev, people that could have presented bad matchups and could have spoiled what was the great 2-fight installment so far of Adesanya versus Pereira now in MMA. But I think 205 is just ripe for the taking because of who's at the top. Once Glover retired, he was kind of the last grappler at the top of 205. Obviously, you have Ankalaev, who I think could present a lot of problems for Poatan, but it doesn't look like the UFC is chomping at the bit to make him the champion or give him that shot, especially after the fight with Blachowicz. So if you put him in there with Jan, or if you put him in there with Jamal Hill, even Yuri Prohaska, all of those would be awesome fights. All of those guys hit like freight trains. You don't know. I think they could all knock each other out on multiple different nights. But I think if you look from a pure stand-up perspective, Alex is more skilled than Jamal, and he's also more skilled than Yuri in a lot of ways. Yuri's just very dynamic and kind of unpredictable, but man, if you let your guard down even just a little bit with Alex, he'll put you to sleep. So I think he needs to have his run at 205. Izzy needs to go settle some things at 185, and then maybe before these crazy grapplers make their way to the top of 185, Izzy just pops up to 205 real quick. Hopefully Alex is the champion and they finish their business there.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. And I think 205 obviously is a great division for Alex Pereira. And if Glover had retired earlier and if Izzy didn't exist as the 185 champion, I don't think that Alex Pereira would have started his UFC career at 185. I think he sized up for 205, and that's about the smallest he would go. I could even see him going to heavyweight at some point. Now we have to see how he can do with knocking out people at 205 and how his chin holds up at 205. But he's got the skills and the range as far as striking goes to deal with a lot of people. And it seems to me like he'll probably have some success at 205. And it doesn't look like he's going to have to do a very long list of contenders to get to a title shot. If you told me Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira was going to fight next for the UFC's belt, I would be all about it. I know he's coming off a loss in a weight class lower, but that fight excites me. Those type of matchups excite me, and I'm sure he'll have to do a bit of heavy lifting, but I'm excited to see where Alex goes from here, and I can't wait to see the new rising of opponents that Izzy's going to be able to take on as the champion.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. And now talking about the man who ended his career at UFC 287, I mean, no better place for Jorge Masvidal to call it a day than in Miami. Right. It was the first time the UFC's been there in 20 years. He was a large reason why they went down there. You got to have game bread on the card if the fight's happening in Miami. And look, he said to himself after the fight, I just don't feel the same in here anymore. He was talking about retirement a lot leading up to the fight. Mike Brown was talking in the build-up about how Jorge has his periods of dedication and then he has a lot of business ventures and he's a multimillionaire. So sometimes he kind of loses his focus and strays away from the game for a little while. But make no mistake, when he's in it, he's in it, and he does his training and he works hard. But he said after the fight, look, I've been doing this a long time. It's time to call it a day. I mean, when he says a long time, he means literally to Kimbo Slice's backyard. That's how long ago it was. This kid was a teenager, bare knuckle fighting grown men in the backyard of one of the most prolific knockout artists, rest in peace, that the MMA world has ever seen in Kimbo Slice. And, it's after 50-something fights and all of those wars that he's been in, he's super famous now. You see the circles that he rolls in. It just felt fitting that Jorge Masvidal give it one last go. He got a standing ovation from that Miami crowd, and he didn't set his gloves in the octagon. In true game-bred fashion, he threw him into the crowd, so somebody from the 305 went home with a really cool souvenir.
Yeah, an expensive souvenir. That thing, hopefully they don't ever sell them, but if they do ever hit the market, those are going to go for a pretty penny. And the who's who was at the attendance in the crowd for 287. And, I mean, you saw Jorge Masvidal go in there and just steal the room. Everybody had eyes on him, and they wanted to hear what he had to say. Win, lose, or draw, he needed to retire, and I'm so glad that he did it. He saw the opportunity. This was his night. This was his moment inside of his city, and it just seemed like the perfect, story. it almost felt like when I was watching the Gilbert Burns versus Jorge Masvidal fight that was the main event. It felt that big of a fight. And I know that there weren't any, title implications on it or anything like that, but it did feel to me like this was the main event of the fight. And then of course you have Izzy and AP coming in next, but Jorge Masvidal has done everything that you could possibly want to do in this sport, from inside of the octagon to outside of the octagon. And now he's taking on a new role. I know he's a busy man. He's an entrepreneur. He's got all kinds of business, but he's also a promoter now. And he's putting on arguably one of the best promotions as far as I've seen that's come out in many, many years. And that was that Game Bred Fighting Promotions. And I really enjoyed that night of boxing. I know some people were like, oh, well, these are just MMA guys boxing each other. But those guys all came to throw. They all came to put on a show. And we had some legends on there. They all got paid a lot of money. So Jorge Masvidal is doing it all right. And I can't wait to see, where he takes his life in his next ventures.
Yeah, for sure. And that game bred production value was very good. Dana White even said himself, look, we think that we're the best, we're the benchmark, and I would agree with that. But he said if you look at how quickly they got the replays up and how smooth the transitions were, like it looked like a promotion that's been doing it for 10 years and they're just getting started. So I think Jorge Masvidal, the sky's the limit for him. The guy's already just absolutely a legend in Miami. He's got a ton of money. He's got an alcohol brand. He's got a boxing promotion. He's dabbling in MMA promotion as well. He's got amazing things ahead of him, and it was the perfect night, the perfect setting. And as you said, win, lose, or draw, it didn't matter. He said, if I win, I'm going to keep going and see if I can get that belt. But if Colby beats Leon, I guess the Leon fight would be cool to have the 3-piece in the soda, but I'm okay not seeing that ever come to fruition. It was hot at one point, and then it kind of cooled off. I don't think that those guys, they could manufacture some beef and make a stir of it, but I don't think those two guys really have any beef with each other anymore. And I think Jorge's just got his sights set on other things. But Gilbert Burns looked great, and he said, look, I know Covington's probably going to get that next shot because he showed up, he made weight. Burns is not happy about it, but that looks like the direction the UFC is heading. And Dana alluded after the fact in the post-fight press conference that they're looking to do a summertime London card again because London's just been hitting so well for them the couple times they've been there in the last year or so. And that will likely be Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. But Gilbert said, give me that backup slot. I'll take that backup slot. I saw what it did for Colby, so either I make my way in there that night or I don't. I show up, I make weight, I get paid, and then I'm next in line for the title. And I'm not mad at that. I mean, I guess Bilal Muhammad would have some sort of claim to that position, but Gilbert Burns is as deserving as anybody.
Yeah, Gilbert Burns has done a lot of heavy lifting, and like he said in the post-fight, I've fought everybody. I've never said no, and I believe him. If there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, I would never turn down any fight, anybody, anywhere, or anytime," and then their manager calls them, "Hey, you want this guy? No. You want this guy? No." So they're very selective with who they fight. I truly believe that when the phone rings for Gilbert Burns and they offer him a name, the next word out of his mouth is yes every single time. And I believe that is the type of mentality you need to have the titles, at your hands, the title, at your fingertips. And Gilbert Burns has done everything as far as being a good guy, being a role model, being an elite level competitor to earn a title shot. And, he's a little bit older, and I think it would be fitting for him to get the next shot. But it's very wise of him to go in there as the backup because crazy things happen in this sport all the time. People can fall in and out. The champ can fall out, and then you've got an interim belt. The UFC loves to do the interims now. Colby Covington could stub his toe, and then you can insert yourself right there. So always be open to that backup position because it can pay off very well.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think that Gilbert could match up well against Leon or Colby. I think either one of those fights would be super compelling. And he looked good against Jorge. He did everything he had to do. The takedowns looked nice. The ground and pound looked good. Jorge, make no mistake, is very dangerous on the feet. And Gilbert did a good job of avoiding a lot of the shots, took almost no damage in the fight. So credit to him. And then two other fights I want to touch on that were just outstanding performances. One was that Gastelum-Curtis fight. I mean, that fight of the night, incredible fight by both men, close fight. Kelvin Gastelum's definitely back and looks better than ever. And then the other is Rob Font. I mean, what an amazing knockout. He took a year off. He said, I had some soul searching to do. I needed to get myself away from the game for a couple months and then really get back into hitting the training hard. And I wanted to come back and showcase a new version of myself. And at 34 years old, Font looks better than ever.
Oh, yeah. Rob Font is a legend. for him to go up all the way into the 12th ranked fighter and say, I'm willing to give you that opportunity because when I was just outside of the top 15 or just in the top 15, somebody gave me an opportunity and let me come down and prove my skills. I think that was really cool. You never want to be that guy that gets up to the top and then refuses to fight anybody that's not bigger than you or has a higher rank than you. And Rob Font, to me, is a good guy for doing that. And, look, when you're number 6 in the world, that means that there's a big target on your back. And a lot of people saw Rob Font get beat, and they're like, oh, well, I could probably beat Rob Font. What has he got? Good boxing? But that boxing is better than even it appears on live television. That guy can throw some hands. If he was a little bit bigger, a dream matchup for me would be to see him and Max Holloway go at it.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, because, I would probably assume that Max Holloway would get that fight and he would win. But Rob Font and Max Holloway boxing under the UFC's rules and the UFC banner would be an awesome fight, and I know it would be fight of the night. And these guys delivered. For the very first round, as long as it lasted, there was some great shots landed by both guys, but every time Rob landed, he was putting a stiff jab in Yanez's face, and then every time he threw a power shot, a hook, or a big power shot, it was doing some serious damage. So I really did enjoy that fight. The whole main card really delivered, and everything on the prelims and the early prelims was impressive too. But that main card did stick out to me as one of those ones that I will remember for a long time. And the crowd in Miami definitely deserved it. They came out there ready to party. They came out there to be the electric city that people know Miami for being. And all the fighters, Kevin Holland, who had a very impressive knockout as well. Knockout. Him and Jorge Masvidal and everybody, Izzy's like, yo, Miami is the place to be. So I know everybody recently has moved down to Miami and it's sort of become like the most happening city in America. But when the UFC goes down there and people are like, yo, this thing is like next level energy, you have to take that in consideration. And probably the UFC will be moving down there a lot more frequently after they saw how successful they were at 287.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, they put the right fighters on the card for that Miami crowd. The Miami crowd was a boisterous crowd. They want some knockouts. They want some fun. And Font, to get back to him, definitely delivered. And I think no slight to Adrian Yanez. He's a great fighter with a great future. He's now just 5-1 in the UFC. But I think this was an example of there's levels to this game, right? Adrian Yanez looked like the boxer that could knock anybody out until he fought the boxer at the top of the division and ended up getting knocked out. I think that Font's boxing is as good as anybody's in the UFC. And I think that if he just cleans a few things up, he's now in his mid-30s, he could potentially make that run. He's 1 or 2 good wins, especially 1 or 2 good finishes away from just getting slid into that title position. I know there's a lot of people at the top of 135, but injuries happen, pullouts happen, and when you win fights like Rob Font just won against Yanez, he's always going to be on the tip of the matchmaker's tongue for throwing him in there for an interim belt or an undisputed belt. So really, really good job to him. Nothing to be ashamed of for Adrian Yanez. Get back up, keep training, and keep chipping your way down to the top. But I think he saw what the top 5 actually brings, and it's very, very good.
Yeah, and Rob Font can definitely deal with some of the guys that are ranked higher than him, but stylistically, those are very tough matchups. So he's got to do all the heavy lifting in the cage that he's been doing, and I think this will kind of become a resurgence for him. We're going to see him come into his next fight with a lot of confidence. He just starts somebody who's a very good fighter, a very good finisher, and he's going to go in with the momentum that he needs to compete with the top 5 guys, to compete with the Corey Sandhagens out there and the Sugar Shawns. Those are very tough matchups for him, but I do think with the right game plan and the right preparation, he can compete with those guys. And, crazy things have happened. Number 6 can move right into a number 3 or number 2 spot and then, finagle himself right into a title shot. So Rob Font definitely deserves a lot of good things. He's a good dude, and I love to watch him fight.
For sure. And somebody else who I think would be in a title shot a lot quicker if he could get his diet and his lifestyle in check is Kelvin Gastelum. And I don't want to, I want to give him his shine for the performance, but he looks like a welterweight in there. He's a great fighter. He's got a chin for days. His strike, he went strike for strike with Curtis. And I mean, those body shots that were landing on him were brutal. And it was the same shot over and over and over again. And you can't tell me that if Kelvin Gastelum couldn't get his weight in check and make that welterweight limit of 170 and get a couple of wins, that him versus Leon Edwards, he wouldn't at least have a chance in that fight.
Yeah, that's a far cry, and I don't think we'll ever see that. I don't know if Kelvin will ever taste the UFC gold, but there are some great matchups. And when we saw him in his prime, and I'll say that's about 2 or 3 years ago, when we saw him rattling off great wins and giving Izzy everything he could handle, and then beating Michael Bisping, and he was just doing all the right things, but he, the diet and the discipline was sort of the one issue. I feel like if he's able to get back to that form, which it looked like he was able to on Saturday, plus, taper down with the food and get himself down to 170, we could see him fight some very fun matchups down there. And, I think the rarest thing in all of UFC is the BMF belt. Now, I don't know if they're ever going to do something with that again. Jorge is now officially gone, but I think there's a lot of BMFs in the UFC still, and I'd love to see it continue. And I don't think it needs to be in a weight class. I think it needs to start at 170, and wherever it goes, it just goes. If somebody at 55 wins it, then that's fine. And then somebody at 55 and 45, they have some beef, they go figure it out. And then if the 45er wins, now the BMF's all the way down at 45. And the same thing can be said if it goes up. Now, if it goes up to heavyweight, I don't really see it trickling itself back down, but crazier things have happened. And I'd love to see Kelvin Gastelum go in there for the fun fights, for the fan favorite fights. And I think there's a lot for him to do in the UFC. And that's why, even though he hasn't had the most successful career, he's still hanging around because the fans love him.
Yeah, he's a fan favorite, and it's just a shame because I think he really could have been champion at 170 if he would have dialed everything in and had his run that he seems to be now starting a resurgence now. If that had happened a couple of years ago and he was in the proper weight class, I think he would have really been a force to be reckoned with. But I don't want to take anything away from his performance. It was a great job. That was the fight of the night. Each of those guys earned their 50 grand and then some. All in all, it was an awesome night of fights. Do you have anything before we wrap this podcast up?
No, I think that was a fun one, and I'm glad we got to recap it in this long form. There's so many fights, but you don't really want to isolate one or two of them. Obviously, Izzy and AP was big enough to do a short video on, but I did like that there were so many good fights, and we wanted to touch on all of them, from Kevin Holland's great knockout and all the other ones. This fight night was worthy of an entire recap. So I'm glad we did this, and maybe we'll break down another one later, but this was a lot of fun.
No doubt. Well, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button and drop us a comment below. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace.